The apartment door was wide open. The lights were still on. Tiny shoes lay beside the couch. A half-finished cup of warm milk rested on the table. But the little girl was gone. There was no scream, no broken window, no sign of a struggle, only silence. Within hours, police flooded the building. Detectives searched every room. Neighbors gathered outside. Television cameras arrived before sunset. By midnight, the young widowed nurse had become the center of the biggest missing child investigation the city had seen in years. Nobody knew the truth, but almost everyone thought they did. Follow this story to the very end, because what looked like a mother's worst nightmare slowly became one of the most shocking courtroom battles anyone in that city would ever witness. Only 8 months earlier, the young woman had left Nigeria hoping for a safer future. She worked endless shifts at a hospital. Every extra hour meant another payment toward a better life. Every paycheck brought her one step closer to keeping the promise she had made beside her late husband's grave. Their daughter would never go without love. The apartment was small, old, affordable. The neighborhood was quiet. Most evenings ended the same way. She returned from work, cooked dinner, read bedtime stories, held her daughter until she fell asleep, then prepared for another long shift. Life was not easy, but it was honest. On the afternoon, everything changed. She left for work, believing it would be another ordinary day. An elderly retired teacher from the same building agreed to watch the little girl for a few hours. It had happened before. Nothing unusual. Nothing dangerous. Then, the elderly neighbor called. Her voice shook. She had stepped downstairs for only a few minutes after hearing someone knocking at another apartment. When she returned, the child had disappeared. The young nurse rushed home. Police met her outside. The apartment had already become a crime scene. Detectives asked question after question. Who knew the child? Who had keys? Who wanted to hurt her? She answered through tears. Boo-hoo, nobody. Boo-hoo, nobody. Boo-hoo, nobody. The search lasted all night. Helicopters circled overhead. Volunteers searched parks. Divers checked nearby rivers. Every hour, without finding the little girl, made the fear worse. Then, investigators found security footage. A woman, wearing a dark coat, carried what appeared to be a sleeping child out of the apartment building. The image spread everywhere, every television station, every newspaper, every phone screen. The city united. Bring the little girl home. Days turned into weeks. No ransom call, no demands, no confirmed sightings. The mother stopped sleeping, stopped eating. Every knock at the door made her heart race. She still believed someone would bring her daughter back. Then the investigation changed direction. Detectives quietly requested financial records, bank statements, insurance documents, employment history. The public did not know why. The mother did not know why. But the questions became different. Not where is your daughter? Why did you receive a large insurance payment after your husband died? Why did you withdraw money 2 days before the disappearance? Why did you tell investigators you drove directly to work? The nurse stared in disbelief. She explained every answer. The insurance payment was legitimate. The money paid old debts. She stopped at a pharmacy before work. Nothing more. The detectives wrote everything down. Nobody reacted. The headlines changed overnight. Missing child investigation takes shocking turn. Police suspect mother. Everything became harder. People who once hugged her crossed the street instead. Strangers insulted her online. Hospital administrators suspended her. Neighbors refused to make eye contact. Some whispered murderer as she walked past. She buried her face inside her hands every night, not because she feared prison, because her daughter was still missing. Then came the arrest. Police arrived before sunrise. Handcuffs closed around trembling wrists. Reporters surrounded the building. Flashing cameras followed every step. The city watched live as the grieving mother was placed inside a police vehicle. Prosecutors announced devastating charges. Not kidnapping, murder. They claimed the little girl had never been abducted. They argued the entire disappearance had been staged. They insisted the security footage was part of an elaborate deception. The courtroom filled before sunrise on the first day of trial. Every seat was occupied. The victim's stuffed teddy bear rested beside the evidence table. No one could ignore it. The prosecutor stood confidently. The story sounded convincing. A struggling widow, money problems, insurance payout, a child suddenly missing. No body, no witnesses, only one person with opportunity, the mother. The jury listened carefully. The nurse barely looked up. She felt every stare, every whisper, every accusation. Her lawyer waited patiently. The defense opened with one sentence: "This case has too many assumptions and not enough truth." The prosecutor presented the surveillance video. The courtroom watched repeatedly. A woman, dark coat, carrying a child. Walking calmly away, the prosecutor insisted it proved planning. The defense did not argue, not yet. Instead, the lawyer asked investigators one simple question: when was the last time the building's cameras were inspected? The lead detective paused. No one expected that question. Records showed maintenance had been delayed several times. The prosecutor dismissed the issue. The footage still showed a child leaving. The defense quietly nodded, then sat down. Nobody understood why. Not yet. The second day of trial began with something nobody expected. The defense did not call a family member. Not a friend, not a co-worker. A building maintenance technician walked into the courtroom carrying a thick folder. He looked uncomfortable. He had spent years repairing electrical systems, security cameras, fire alarms, door access panels. He had no connection to the nurse, no reason to protect her. The defense asked about the apartment building's surveillance system. The technician opened the folder. Inspection reports, repair requests, email chains. Each page told the same story. The cameras had been malfunctioning for weeks. Power interruptions caused timestamps to drift. Recordings occasionally skipped several minutes, sometimes several hours. The courtroom grew quieter. The prosecutor stood. Even if the clock was wrong, the footage still showed someone carrying the child away. The technician agreed. The image existed, but the recorded time could not be trusted. The defense thanked him, then called a forensic video analyst. The analyst enlarged the footage frame by frame. Tiny details appeared: streetlights, passing buses, a digital billboard across the road. The analyst compared those details with transportation records and advertising schedules. The billboard displayed an advertisement that had ended 3 days before the reported disappearance. A city bus, seen in the background, followed a route that only operated on weekends. The child vanished on a Tuesday. The courtroom froze. The video everyone believed was recorded on the wrong day. The prosecutor quickly argued that the error changed nothing. The defense remained calm. If the recording happened 3 days earlier, then it could not prove the child disappeared on the afternoon the prosecution claimed. The jury looked back at the screen. For the first time, doubt entered the room. The defense moved to another subject: cell phone records. The nurse's phone remained inside the hospital for almost her entire shift. Security access logs showed her entering restricted medical wards. Patients remembered seeing her. Doctors confirmed she assisted during an emergency procedure. The prosecution admitted she had been at work, but insisted she planned everything beforehand. The defense asked a simple question: if she planned the crime, where was the body? Months of searching. No blood, no clothing, no weapon, no burial site, nothing. The prosecutor answered with silence. The next witness surprised everyone. The elderly retired teacher. The woman blamed herself every single day. Her shoulders looked smaller than before. Her voice trembled. She described the child laughing only minutes before she disappeared. She admitted stepping downstairs after hearing someone banging on another apartment door. She was gone for less than 5 minutes. When she returned, the apartment was empty. The prosecutor suggested she had become confused. Age affects memory. Stress changes perception. The elderly woman slowly reached into her handbag. She removed an old notebook. Every day, she wrote small reminders. Appointments, shopping lists, weather. That afternoon, she had written something unusual. Someone knocking loudly through the building. Unknown delivery van outside. Child laughing upstairs. The notes had been written before police arrived. The prosecutor examined the notebook. Nothing appeared altered. The defense thanked the witness, then asked one final question. Had she ever seen the woman from the surveillance footage before? The elderly neighbor answered immediately. No, but she remembered something else. The woman carried the child too comfortably, like someone the little girl already trusted. The courtroom fell silent again. Police reopened interviews with everyone who had regular contact with the family. Neighbors, co-workers, hospital staff, childcare volunteers, mail carriers. One detective noticed a name that appeared repeatedly, a woman who occasionally organized community events for immigrant families. She had disappeared shortly after the child went missing. Nobody had questioned it before. She simply stopped answering calls. The detective searched travel records. She had left the country 48 hours after the disappearance. A warrant was issued immediately. The prosecution still pressed ahead. They argued the nurse invented imaginary suspects because the evidence against her was collapsing. The defense smiled slightly. Not because they had won, because investigators had finally started looking in the right direction. The trial paused for 3 days while police pursued new leads. Reporters filled television screens every hour. Public opinion shifted. Some still believed the mother was guilty. Others began asking uncomfortable questions. Had everyone judged too quickly? The detective assigned to the international investigation barely slept. Border records, flight manifests, financial transfers. One payment caught his attention. A large deposit entered the community organizer's account 2 days after leaving the country. The sender was a shell company. The company had no employees, no office, only paperwork. Tracing ownership led detectives through several countries. Every trail ended with another fake business, then another. Finally, one account linked to an investigation already underway, an international child trafficking network. The detective immediately contacted foreign authorities. The response came within hours. The network had been under surveillance for months. Several children from immigrant families had disappeared under similar circumstances. The victims were carefully selected. Parents working long shifts, limited local family support, small apartments, predictable routines. The courtroom had no idea any of this was happening. The nurse remained in custody. Every night, she stared at the ceiling. She replayed the last morning with her daughter, the goodbye hug, the tiny smile, the promise to bring home her favorite snack after work. Those memories became both comfort and torture. One evening, a prison officer quietly handed her a letter. There was no return address. Inside was only one sentence: "Never stop believing she is alive." The handwriting meant nothing to investigators, but the words changed something inside her. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to hope. Meanwhile, police abroad raided several properties connected to the trafficking network. Most were empty. The suspects had moved quickly, but they left behind documents, photographs, children's toys, false passports. Then officers found a small notebook. Every child had been assigned a number, a destination, a payment amount. One entry stood out: a little girl matching the missing child's age. Transferred only days after the disappearance. Alive. The detective read the line 3 times. His hands began to shake. He immediately called the prosecutor, then the defense, then the judge. Everything changed in a single phone call. The little girl had never been murdered. She had never been buried. She had never stopped breathing. She was alive, somewhere. But finding her before the traffickers disappeared forever would become the race that determined whether a grieving mother walked free or spent the rest of her life carrying the weight of a crime that never happened. The courtroom reopened before the rescue operation was complete. Nobody wanted to wait. The judge understood the urgency. So did the lawyers. The prosecutor stood with a different expression. The confidence from the first day had disappeared. The case no longer looked certain. The nurse sat quietly. She noticed the change. She did not understand it. Not yet. The lead detective became the first witness. He described the international investigation, the shell companies, the fake identities, the money trails, the trafficking network. The courtroom listened without moving. Then the detective revealed the discovery from the notebook. One child matched the missing girl's description, marked as alive. The nurse covered her mouth. Her body trembled. She wanted to believe it, but hope had hurt too many times before. The prosecutor objected. The notebook alone proved nothing. The judge agreed. The jury could not treat it as confirmation. Not yet. The detective nodded. Then he added another detail. Foreign investigators had located a safe house connected to the same network. The operation was already underway. Every second mattered. Court paused for the afternoon. Nobody left the courthouse. Reporters crowded every hallway. Television stations broadcast live. The entire country waited. The nurse sat alone inside a holding room. She folded her hands, closed her eyes, remembered every bedtime song, every birthday, every laugh. She whispered the same silent prayer she had repeated for months. Please, let her be alive. Thousands of miles away, heavily armed officers surrounded a quiet farmhouse. No lights, no movement. The command was given. The doors came down. The suspects ran. Some surrendered. Others fought. Within minutes, the house was secured. Officers searched every room. One bedroom, empty. Second bedroom, empty. Then a small locked door. An officer forced it open. Several frightened children looked back. Some cried, some hid. One little girl stared without speaking. She clutched a worn stuffed rabbit. An investigator slowly knelt. The photograph from the missing persons file matched perfectly. The child was alive. She looked frightened, thin, confused, but alive. The detective immediately made the call. Back inside the courthouse, every phone on the prosecution table vibrated. The lead detective answered. He listened quietly, then lowered his head. Tears filled his eyes. The courtroom became silent. The judge asked only one question. Was the child found? The detective looked toward the nurse, then nodded. Alive. The young mother collapsed into tears. Court officers rushed to support her. Even members of the jury wiped away tears. The victim everyone believed was dead had just been rescued. The prosecutor slowly stood. Months of accusations suddenly felt unbearable. The entire theory of the case had collapsed. The judge called for order. It took several minutes before anyone could continue. The detective returned to the witness stand. Foreign authorities had arrested 8 suspects. Laptops, phones, financial records, everything had been seized. One device contained photographs of children before they were trafficked. The missing little girl appeared in several images. Each photograph carried a timestamp. Every one of them proved she was alive while her mother sat in jail, accused of murder. The defense rested. There was almost nothing left to argue. The prosecutor requested a brief recess. When court resumed, the atmosphere had completely changed. The prosecution withdrew the murder charge. Then every remaining criminal charge. The judge looked toward the nurse. For months, she had entered the courtroom in handcuffs. Now the judge ordered every restraint removed immediately. The metal cuffs unlocked. No one applauded. The moment was too heavy for celebration. The judge spoke carefully. Justice requires evidence, not assumptions, not public opinion, not headlines. This court recognizes that an innocent woman lost her freedom because the investigation followed the easiest explanation instead of the correct one. The nurse lowered her head. She cried quietly, not from relief, from exhaustion. The judge dismissed every charge. She was free. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered behind police barriers. Months earlier, many of those same people had shouted insults. Today, they waited in silence. No one knew what to say. The reporters asked whether she forgave the people who accused her. She walked past every microphone. There would be time for words later. Only one thing mattered now: seeing her daughter. 2 days later, authorities arranged the reunion. A quiet room. No cameras. No reporters. No politicians. Only doctors, counselors, investigators. The door opened slowly. A tiny little girl stepped inside, holding the same worn stuffed rabbit. She looked around carefully. The nurse froze. She was afraid to move, afraid it was another dream. The little girl stared for a few seconds. Then recognition appeared. She dropped the rabbit, ran forward, wrapped both arms around her mother. The room filled with tears. Even experienced detectives turned away. The little girl refused to let go. The nurse held her tighter than she had ever held anyone in her life. Months of fear disappeared in a single embrace. No words could repair what had happened, but love survived. Weeks later, investigators uncovered the final piece of the puzzle. The loud knocking heard by the elderly neighbor had never been random. One trafficker knocked on apartment doors, pretending to deliver packages. Another waited nearby. When the retired teacher stepped downstairs to investigate, the apartment was left unprotected for less than 5 minutes. That tiny window was all the traffickers needed. The child had trusted the woman who carried her. She believed she was going downstairs to meet her mother. The surveillance video had never shown a murderer. It had captured a kidnapping in progress. The investigation also revealed why immigrant families had been targeted. The criminals believed parents with limited relatives nearby would have fewer people watching over their children. They believed those families would be easier to isolate, easier to manipulate, easier to blame. They were wrong. The arrests continued for months. More children were rescued, more families were reunited. The trafficking network collapsed piece by piece. The elderly retired teacher visited the nurse one final time. She still blamed herself. The nurse gently embraced her. There was nothing to forgive. The real blame belonged to those who stole children, and to everyone who rushed to condemn an innocent mother before knowing the truth. The apartment was never the same again. Neither was the young widow. She eventually returned to work. Slowly, patient by patient, day by day, her daughter started smiling again, sleeping peacefully again, laughing again. Some scars remained invisible, but they no longer faced them alone. Years later, people remembered the case for many reasons. Some remembered the international rescue. Some remembered the courtroom. Others remembered the investigation. But those who truly understood never forgot the most important lesson. The greatest danger was never the lie told by criminals. It was how quickly ordinary people accepted that lie without asking one more question. Because sometimes the loudest accusation hides the quietest truth. And sometimes the most important witness is not the one everyone hears. It is the one almost everyone ignores. That quiet voice saved a child, freed an innocent mother, and reminded an entire courtroom that justice begins only when the whole truth is finally allowed to speak.